this is an event I am so excited about, part of our Teaching, Learning, and Generative AI series. And this is a series that's a collaboration between my office and Create for STEM, where we are hosted today. And this idea really came out of some conversations I think Mike Frazier, one of our doctoral students, and Dr. Michael Lachney were having. And they reached out and offered to do some one-on-one, bring your laptop, let's get into it and figure it out sort of sessions. So this is completely interactive. We are recording this, just so you know. The idea is essentially, if we think it's, Sue will look at the video later, and if it seems to be helpful to post in terms of walking through slides and instructions and that sort of thing, then we'll probably put that on the website, but we'll also see how it goes. So I apologize, I need to return to my other meeting that is still ongoing, but I want to thank all of you for your interest in this and being here today, and a special thank you to our two really wonderful facilitators today. So I'm sure you will learn a lot from them, and I am sad I can't stay and learn along with you, but I will turn it over to them. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Bowman. My name's Mike. I'm a former high school English teacher, so that's like kind of where I come from with all of this. But I've always been interested in integrating technology, especially emerging technology. So a lot of my research has been focused on integrating ChatGPT, particularly in undergraduate learning contexts. That's a little bit about me. I don't know, Michael, if you want to.
Yeah, my name is Michael Lachney. I study computer science education. Been doing that for about over a decade, specifically thinking about culturally relevant, responsive approaches to computer science education, and have now started to think about what do we mean when we talk about AI literacies, and specifically for teachers, in-service, and pre-service teachers.
Awesome. And we're both, by the way, from the Educational Psychology and Educational Technology programs. Okay, so to start, here's the link to our slides for today. I'll put this back up at the end as well if you want to get that, but the tiny URL or the QR code will work for you there. A number of hands-on activities planned, which are linked in the slides, so if you have access to them, that would be awesome. Okay, so we wanted to kind of start by sort of calibrating this particular session within a larger context of some of the conversations that are happening around generative AI. So lots of authors are talking about and studying, the impact of Gen AI on education, right? Or the impact on academia and research. There's a lot of discussions about academic integrity and what that means and whether it needs to be redefined. AI competencies and literacies, right? A lot of people are talking about those. Are they similar, different from Gen AI literacies and competencies? Of course, we have to think about systemic and policy challenges as well. So those are some of the conversations that are happening today. And again, those are all linked in those slides. I'll put that QR code up at the end of the session again. So we're kind of situated within those conversations, but I think it's really important to be able to understand the actual tools themselves in order to make better, more informed decisions in these areas. So the focus of this session today is to try and better understand how these language models work in order to make more informed decisions in the work that we do. So our driving question is, how can we interact effectively with Gen AI tools like ChatGPT to help us with the meaningful work that we're conducting in educational contexts? So to start, we'll do a little formative activity to get to know what our background knowledge is. So we're going to do a KWL chart, which stands for Know, Wonder, and Learn. So right now we're going to fill out just the K and the W. So what do you already know about generative AI tools like ChatGPT? What do you wonder and want to learn? So this will link you to a Google Jamboard. You could also put in that tiny URL. So you'll see some slides on here. Google Jamboard, if you're not familiar, is a sort of digital collaborative whiteboard tool. On the first slide, which is no, you can feel free to grab a sticky note and type something in there that you already know about Gen AI or ChatGPT. And then on the second slide, wonder. What do you wonder? What questions do you have? What do you want to learn?
Do you want the slides? Okay, so screen to the Jamboard, and then I can give you the slides. FD7E. Huh. Let me make sure. Well, let me, you know what, let me see if this one works. And then that will. Oh no, you're good. Oh, that's so strange. Let me. Tiny URL. No, you don't need to download anything. Let me, you know what? Just email you. All right, that should be coming right to you. Sorry about that.
Maybe about another minute or two to finish up posting on the no and then also on the wonder slide.
Scroll down just a bit. And then here. Yep. And then just look right there. y'all are thinking about fitting generative AI into larger projects, right? Too often, for Mike and I, who geek out over technology all day, we focus on the tech. But actually, for teachers, it's more about situating these tools within their larger goals. And that's what I'm seeing. That's really great.
Great, all right, thank you. So just noticing some things, prompt engineering. Yeah, we can address that. Crafting seems like a valuable skill. Yep. How queries are framed can inform the response. Yes. The quality and the content of your inputs directly affects the quality and content of the outputs. No, very much. That's great. That's awesome. Maybe we do a turn and talk. So talk about some things that you know, maybe that you saw up here, maybe you put up here, and maybe something that you wonder about Gen AI or ChatGPT. So we'll turn and talk, and then we'll share out. Yeah. Okay. Did you learn in wonder? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's so good.
There's some UNESCO guidelines out. There's like multiple countries that have adopted some AI guidelines in education.
That's so cool.
But that's definitely an area right now that is still being figured out.
So much help.
Which makes it tough for us as facilitators.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're allowed to do this. I was working with some previous teachers.
Oh, that's awesome.
To use ChatGPT to help them lesson plan. And perfect. I heard one say, like, this is exactly what we needed. Can we just copy and paste this? Like, this feels wrong. Yeah.
Ooh, so important. That's right.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those are all great questions. Yeah, yeah, and I love the idea of you just going in and just playing with it, right? And yeah, yep, yep. No, it's super. It's once you get into it, you'll learn. It's kind of like a very fancy search engine. Now, the challenge is when you ask it to generate information. How do you check the sources, right? And so, David Wong and I had this long back and forth students who runs the exams. And how would you cite generative AI, right? And
That's out in Ohio. Yeah.
there's not a whole lot, because it's different than like citing an article, because you can go and look at the article and look at where the article's information's coming from, but there is a certain amount of opacity with this
Okay.
with
So you
AI.
don't fully know where
Right.
it's getting at.
Right.
So that's because
I don't want to root for it anymore.
I wish I had just for AI. So quality business
It can, so it has to have a training set that's large enough. And actually, I put some terminology out there. There's a useful terminology, useful term, in terms of how AI classifies information. Yep, and it's, yep, and so you have, you have a training set. And then you have this thing called a generator. And a generator is using all this kind of fake information to push up against, so to speak, what it thinks based off of the training set is going to be reliable. And so the thing that is making the determination, making the classification is called the discriminator. So it's right. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to get 2 shares with the class before we unlock the next slide. What did you guys talk about?
Well, when we're talking about, we want to see student thinking, and how do we know, I think you said it very well, how do we know, are we looking at the student's ability to use the tool, or the student's ability to, how did you to frame it?
Yeah, are they really good at crafting prompts or queries, and they can really, or are they taking what they find and synthesizing it themselves? Because sometimes the quality of the synthesis it does depends on how you ask the question. So are they really good at using the tool, or are they really good at synthesizing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I do think that your ability to craft a good question indicates some sort of like critical thinking or an understanding of the content. I was talking to a professor in, I think, chemical engineering or something, and he said, you know, I tried ChatGPT and I put in this really hard question for it, and it answered it really well. I was like, probably because you asked the question really well, you get a lot of information. So yeah, and Joe Kraychek was always asking me, like, how do you know you're asking it the right questions? And I was like, that's a really good question. And I don't necessarily, I might not, right? How do you explain the ocean to a fish? There are lots of, things that I don't know that I don't know that I don't know. And so, but I think that approaching a tool like ChatGPT with a framework of debugging, and I'll talk about this briefly, is the most beneficial way that I've been able to think about it. Like, if it can draft something for me, then I need to find the bugs in it. I need to figure out what's wrong with it, which I can do if I know what the content is about. Okay, one more share. What other things are we thinking and wondering?
I'll contribute. Mine is the top left one there. I'm quite interested when I'm working with graduate students, especially as they're thinking about research. And I've often taught our proposal development course. And it's often hard for students to move from a general idea to an actual researchable question. And I'm curious whether AI could be helpful in that process and what that would look like.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do think it can be, because it is, I think it's in some ways a calculator, but also a mirror. So like it can sort of linguistically match you, right? And so what you're able to give it will definitely help you brainstorm. I think you can collaborate, pretty easily with a tool like ChatGPT if you're asking good questions. So yeah, absolutely. And there's been in the literature too a lot of use cases where people are using generative AI for brainstorming. There's a tool, what was it? It's called Elicit. There's an AI tool called Elicit, and it allows you to, I guess I can just show you real quick, but this I think will help answer your question. Maybe it's not a thing anymore. But you're able to put in a research question, and it would suggest similar research questions, that were like more specific or honed in on a particular concept. So yeah, I do think that it can be used in that way for sure. Awesome. Any other shares before we move on?
One thing we've been doing in the EPAT program that's been really interesting is thinking about this in terms of comprehensive exams. Right? We want to, and we're encouraging what we're calling a collaborative stance, but where students can iteratively engage with ChatGPT to help them kind of brainstorm answers and ideas. But then how do we make that transparent? And so now we're in the process of figuring out what would a methodology section look like in a comprehensive exam, or a paper, or a manuscript for that collaboration.
I'm glad you're having those conversations, Dr. Lachney, because I will be taking my comps. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing some of the things we know and some of the things we're wondering that'll help us inform the rest of the session, and we'll come back to that to do the what did we learn section. So we have an activity, a first activity here to, I think, I put confirm there because I liked the alliteration that we had up there, but I think establish might be a better verb or goal.
All right. So we're gonna so when you hear the term AI, think about it in the same way when you are in the grocery store and you see you want to get veggie burgers, right? And you look at the veggie burgers and you say, oh, all natural veggie burgers. I want natural veggie burgers, right? But what does natural mean, right? It's pretty ambiguous. It's actually just a marketing term. I want you to think about the use of AI and when you see it in the world as kind of the same thing. It is a term that invokes a lot of imagery but is rather ambiguous and actually doesn't describe the technologies that we're talking about very well, right? So, so ChatGPT is a large language model. Large language models aren't new, but what is new is the ability to bring large language models together with vast amounts of data. And the large language models can help to discriminate different patterns for answering inquiries, basically your prompts, right? And so what we'd like you to do is so I want you to learn a little bit about what ChatGPT is. What is this thing that we're calling generative AI? So ask ChatGPT to come up with a list of vocabulary terms related to understanding how generative AI tools like ChatGPT work, right? This is going to be your first prompt, right? Then personalize it. Ask it which of these are most relevant to your specific instructional contexts. Think about your audience, right? So we know that across age groups, we're going to have to define things differently. And sometimes the fidelity of the terms are going to change compared to like how we would define things in an academic manuscript compared to how we would define something in a fifth grade classroom, right? And so I want you to look up some terms and then think about how you would define them for your specific student audience, okay? For your domain as well, right? Maybe the way you would define a term for an art class would be different than a science class, right? So you're thinking about audience and you're thinking about domain. Here's just some basic terms that I think are useful to think about. Neural networks are kind of an interconnected set of input, hidden, and output nodes that recognize and reproduce data patterns, right? And when you have multiple neural networks, you can have machine learning computational systems that use data to redesign themselves for generating those outputs. Generative AI is basically a marketing term to describe machine learning models that use existing data to produce media, right? This could be text, but it could also be like images. And like you hear these things we're not going to need artists anymore, right? Because we're going to have generative AI. But actually, when you start to look at what's being produced, it's not very good. We might think it looks good, but you know, you have like, I don't know, a squirrel that has, you know, 5 tails. And the idea, you know, trying to help AI figure out how to have it just have 1 tail, or its tail doesn't like, you know, go into its mouth, is not a trivial problem, right? And so I want us to be critical in thinking about actually the quality of what's being produced. You have a training set. These are data sets that are used to train machine learning models, right? Like I said, you have you have these models, and you have large amounts of data that you're using to train them. You have a discriminator within these. It's a mechanism in a machine learning model for classifying what is fake data generated by what's called a generator and what is real data. And the generator is a mechanism in machine learning model that creates fake data for helping the discriminator make that classification. Now, I wouldn't describe any of this in this way to like a 5th grader, right? But it probably is important that students start to have some understanding of how these things work. So I'd like you to kind of figure out who your student audience is, or first generate a vocabulary list of generative AI terms, choose 1 or 2 of those terms, collaborate with ChatGPT to define them for your domain and your student audience. Okay? Anything you want to add, Mike?
I don't think so. It doesn't have to be those exact.
Yes, I just wanted to give you some examples of what some terms may be.
So we get to doing that by going to Valerie?
Yes, chat.openai.com.
Yeah, if you've never used ChatGPT before, it's free to sign up with your email address.
So sign up with the university.
Yep. No, you're good. Yeah, great.
Oh, wait, that's not the updated one. So in case you, yeah.
So I was going to say, this shows your iteration, right?
Yes.
Your debugging.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. In case you have no idea where to start, this is what I did. You can just really start talking to it like you would a human. Give me a list of vocabulary terms related to understanding how generative AI tools like ChatGPT work. I will also mention here that the response to me is probably going to be different from the response that you get. Not only because it generates original content each time, but also because I have the premium version and I have custom instructions for it to answer certain ways. So if there are things different here, then that's why. And then I said, okay, which of these, because it gave me a list of 13 things. So I said, okay, which of these are most relevant for me to discuss with my pre-service teachers who might use tools like ChatGPT for their own learning, their professional work, and when they're teaching K-12 students. So it's probably able to pick up here that teaching K-12 students, okay, those are minors, right? There's probably going to be some things related to minors in here. But it also knows that from my work with pre-service teachers that they have a tendency to be excited about technologies. So there's some details in there that affect that. Maybe when you get a chance, you can talk to the person next to you about the sorts of things that you're finding. Is it similar or different from what I had? What did you prompt it? What was the result?
It's very similar list of terms. This is my prompt here. This is my 2 bars. We had 13 of them. But for some reason it went a little longer. Yeah, she had some others. Some of these are
But
Yeah.
zero shot learning.
so these terms are really explain to you how it works, basically.
Yeah,
It's
they're-
like this top case sampling. Samples are used in language and links words chosen.
Those are good. I'm going to add that to the list.
So it must be, it generates words in response and it takes the top one. So it's.
Yep.
Wow. It was interesting, I see higher ed and everything. Most stuff for the grad students studying higher education, we get focused on.
I-
Which was interesting. Points of fairness and equity
Yeah.
there, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Learning or
So this
prompting?
one's been- it's in the
Uh,
literature, right?
Yes, no, absolutely.
It was zero shot learning.
Learning, okay.
Few shot.
Yeah, 'cause it's scraping anything that it
It's
can.
still- it's just the applications, it's incredible.
Yeah, yep.
Anybody find any interesting ones we should add to the list?
I have one that I'm checking on, which is interesting. The unsupervised learning.
Okay. Yeah. You have unsupervised and supervised learning. Michael, I don't know if you want to briefly address that one.
What's that?
Supervised and unsupervised learning.
For generative AI, in terms of talking about deep learning,
Yes.
I am not prepared to talk about that.
Okay.
Are you?
No worries. I can give you a brief explanation
Yes,
of what I know about it, which is very basic. But supervised learning is where an AI is getting feedback and putting outputs out, and then a human is checking on that learning. Right? Unsupervised learning is where it keeps learning from itself without a human in the loop.
Mike, I also have chatbot.
Chatbot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. So like a machine learning model, right, or a large language model is sort of what's the best metaphor? It's really the hardware, I guess you could say, behind what you're interacting with, right, or the back end. I should say the back end.
Oh.
The front end is more like a tool like ChatGPT, right? You're interacting with that on the user's side. What else? So this one also came up. So these are some prompting techniques for generative AI. With the language model is called zero or few shot learning. Zero shot learning being a model is able to do something the first time that it hasn't been necessarily trained to do. few-shot learning in the context of prompting, in the context of something like ChatGPT, is you try and give it as much information as possible and as few prompts to get it to do the task. So that's one, I think, technique that is commonly used is few-shot prompting. I'm just gonna few-shot. And then the other one that I added here is chained prompting, which is kind of the opposite in a way of that few-shot prompting, where you're just interacting back and forth with the AI to give it more information and adjust things. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on now for the sake of time. Thank you all for sense-making with some of those vocabulary words related to Gen AI. I was in Orlando in October and I heard a professor who worked on has some work called debugging by design that I thought was really interesting. And it's related to constructionism in engineering education, but I thought it was interestingly relevant when we're interacting with tools like ChatGPT. So the original idea of debugging by design has computer science students design products that have bugs in them for their peers, and then they have to debug them, which is a cool learning experience for both sides. And so I thought this was interesting in the sense of like using ChatGPT, because I feel like I'm constantly debugging when I'm using ChatGPT. And if I'm going to facilitate learning, right, to help other students use a tool like that, then I'm really kind of debugging by design. So here's an example from the original work. This student created a sick cloud throwing up a colorful rainbow with some circuits, and there were 2 loose threads that caused short circuits and stuff like that. And so they pointed out and explained all the bugs in their program. And so I feel like this is kind of what I'm doing when I'm interacting with ChatGPT, because it'll give me something that I know is not entirely right. It'll have bugs in it, right? And I'll say, well, no, not this, but yes, this. So I'm giving it that feedback, and I feel like I'm kind of debugging as I'm going through. I think a lot of people consider a tool like ChatGPT as something that's just going to do the work for you, and it can if you have like really low critical thinking type work to do. But if you're really going to do critical and creative work in collaboration with a tool like ChatGPT, I think that you really have to push it and yourself. Okay, so let's do that. We'll challenge ourselves and ChatGPT a little bit in our next activity. So I put a couple of resources in here. There are so many resources out there related to Gen AI and prompt engineering and things like that. But I thought, why don't we go to the source, the people who made ChatGPT? So OpenAI, who made ChatGPT, created a prompt engineering guide and some example prompts, a repository of example prompts that you can go through. So if you'd like, you can take a look at a couple of those resources, take a couple of minutes, and then I'd like you to try something new with ChatGPT. Maybe you'll find something that inspires you, and then as you're playing, try to identify some affordances and limitations of the tool related to your particular use case or instructional context. And then our deliverable is to put what we learned on the Learn slide in our Jamboard. This quote by Punya Mishra, who used to be here and did a lot of work with TPAC, which is Technology Integration into Instruction. He published an update of TPAC in the age of generative AI, and he likened ChatGPT to a smart but sometimes drunk intern. And so it can kind of make stuff up sometimes, and you have to supervise it a little bit, even though it is fairly smart and able to get some things done. So that one's helped me a little bit. Like, I'm kind of playing Socrates here, right? I'm the one trying to guide and debug this intern.
So it's because I didn't log out of some prompts. And so what seems to be here are
Yeah.
But if you were reading from a chapter in a book, how would you put that whole text in here and get it to look at it? You'd have to copy your chapter.
Yeah, you would have to assume that it might not have access to the book,
Access,
right?
So you would put it right into your
Mhm.
search block of text on this information.
Yeah.
So just to,
Let's see what happens.
because it's occurred to me when I saw,
Mm.
what did that,
All categories, prompt examples.
I
Explore.
wanted to say, what is that, I lost it, keywords.
Yep.
Oh, keywords, so would I just say here, or do I put it up here? Maybe put it right up in the phone.
Results. So I think for documentation, hang on, I'm gonna pull it up.
Okay. Let's see.
You were
I
in,
went into this one here.
Oh, yeah.
Examples. Let's see. Yeah, that's what came up. And what I saw was all these
So I was looking
things.
here, the guidelines that it's talking about.
So if you click on keywords.
Oh, click on keywords, oh, okay.
So,
Strategy.
see, I have a PDF of an article.
Yep.
Can I just
So where do you
So-
put your
upload
text
it
in?
and not ask
So you'll
questions?
provide a block of text.
Yes.
Open, play.
I have a cluster of articles, say.
You'll provide a block of text and your task is to extract what
Pieces that are being
corresponds.
considered for a lit review.
So you have to write it down first?
That must get into it.
So,
It will probably struggle with that. If you give it one at a time, it would do better. 'Cause,
Start it
it
there.
does generally tend to do better when you break down complex tasks. And it will probably time out if you try to give it like 6 articles at once.
So when I do this, should I create a new chat, or is it gonna be influenced by what's been going on already in the prior?
It depends on your prompt. If it's
so
a
you would wanna
if it's
take
pretty
these
obvious,
prompts
you're asking a
into
completely different question, it
your-
probably won't be influenced
into
by the
your,
previous stuff.
Okay. I'll just
Chat.
try it here.
And where did my chat go? Sorry. Let's see. Keywords. Chat.
For the
So-
prompt examples, Mike, do you take the, your prompt into your chat?
I think you could.
Yep.
So I was playing with the keywords, but
You
where do you put the chat?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I guess you would put this into your prompt, and then it'll probably say something like, "Okay, I'm ready for the first statement." Then you can put your statement
Into your,
in your chat.
yep, okay. So you might wanna, it'd be probably easy to have like 2 windows open.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
So, but you move it in then?
Yep.
Okay.
so these are just examples
These
that
are
you can
examples
use.
of what to have.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you ignore the API stuff.
So yeah, it's just kind of showing me, I would want to explain this code, so I would put this in, right?
Okay.
And then it would generate, this is what it would generate as a sample
I
response.
see, okay.
Yep.
Play with this, see, maybe see how that, okay. There you go, it does. It can do a lot.
Yes.
Next couple of minutes or so, when you're ready, maybe you can make your way back to the Jamboard and post something on our Learn slide. Something you were able to, take away you might have from today. Or something you're still wondering even.
So Pix-to-Pix, a framework for image-to-image translation using adversarial network, enabling transformations such as turning sketches into real images. I said, how would you describe this to a first grader? Okay, imagine you have a magical crayon that you can turn your drawings into real pictures. Pix-to-Pix is that magical crayon, but for computers.
I use ChatGPT often to write bedtime stories for my 8-year-old. So like he'll tell me a couple of things that happened at school today, and I'll like throw them into ChatGPT.
Wow.
Yeah, Ann was saying this, if I could, it's all right, yeah, it's, this wonderful story of a mother with a child with autism who, you were saying, uses like stories to help
Yeah,
prepare.
to help prepare
Social
the.
stories.
Yeah, social
the story.
stories.
And she said it takes a long time to write them, and her child is now middle school age, and so there's many situations. She doesn't have enough time to write the stories, and she's using AI to write the
just helped my
stories, and
niece
she
do that
said
last
it was
week.
it's saving her a lot of time.
Yeah, there's a lot of good examples, I think, of a tool like ChatGPT helping us to do things that are uniquely human and creative. All right, as we're working on that learned slide, I did also want to just kind of mention some things about some of your questions that we had in Wonder that haven't come up yet in the conversation. So like, is there room, for example, for generative AI in elementary teacher education? What would that look like? A couple of things come to mind. One being the UNESCO guidelines that students should be 13, at least 13, to use generative AI. That's just their recommendation. And there was also debate that should be raised to 16. With that said, I've seen a lot of government endorsed examples where there is like K-12 AI education, including in the United States probably. So I think there's probably room in some sort of way. What are some lessons learned so far on allowing students to use Gen AI effectively and ethically? I can just talk about some of my research related to this. So I've observed a couple of undergraduate courses at Michigan State where the professors were integrating ChatGPT. One was an urban planning course. It was an upper level urban planning course. So it was like 400 levels, and most of them were like seniors and about to become urban planners and go into the field. And therefore, I think they had a fairly high level of motivation to actually learn the materials. They had a sort of mastery approach to learning. And for that reason, the way that they interacted with ChatGPT, they seemed to be pretty hesitant to use it actually, which is counterintuitive to what the narrative is saying right now. Everybody's freaking out that all the students are all cheating and everything. But from what we were able to observe, and I was there for every single class in the back watching, most of the students were only really willing to interact with ChatGPT to the extent the instructor allowed it. So even though he was like, use it for anything, just tell me how you use it. I want to know. I want to learn too. And then they wouldn't use it. And then he would say, okay, here's some guides. Like give it a role and a goal and maybe some more specific details. And then they would say role, goal, specific details. Yeah, so I think it really depends on a couple of things. How students perceive the value of the content that they're interacting with, but also how they perceive their identity with whatever, related to whatever task they're working on. I think that students who are more highly motivated are likely to use it in constructive ways and be more transparent about their use. And students who might be a little bit less motivated for a particular topic or content area, they might misuse. I don't want to talk too much. All right, what did we learn? Instruct the model to answer using reference text. Yeah, that's a really good one. The more real world data you can give it, the more useful it's going to be to you and the less likely it will be to generate things that are not true. I can upload a PDF of an article and discuss it with the AI tool. Yes, you can if you have the premium version of ChatGPT. There are other AI tools that you can do that with as well. There are a few specifically related to academic research, like I think one is Scite, S-C-I-T-E, where you can upload a PDF. Anthropic's Claude is generally better at interacting with large PDFs and text files compared to ChatGPT. That's another one. I can ask the Gen AI tool to analyze my writing from the perspective of Michael Lachney and Mike Frazier. It might find things on Michael Lachney. It probably won't find correct things about Mike Frazier because I'm not currently more popular than an old skateboarder who's also and then asking for citations. Ooh, who wants to say more about that one? What was your thought on citations?
I was playing with that one. I just put some seminal words down just to cite,
Yeah.
and it got most of them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, something that it can do is generate text that it thinks you want to see. And, you know, so if you say, give me some citations on X topic, it's going to give you a bunch of citations that sound like they're related to X topic and might even give you some notable scholars who actually are in that field talking about that topic, but the details are just totally made up.
I just put in cognitive load theory.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
and-
Yep. Yeah, if you put in like seminal works for sure, yeah, it'll
Yeah.
get those in like theories. But again, this goes back to the first one. The more real world data you can give it, the better it'll do. So something that I've sometimes done is given it a real APA citation with an abstract or a summary or something like that, and then like tell me what you think this paper is about, then kind of scaffold as I'm skimming through that paper. Yeah, a lot of use cases. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. So I did want to share some additional resources for you as we wrap up, and then after this we can just kind of talk one-on-one, small groups, or whatever. One thing we do want to do is try and plan activities and content for the next more advanced session where we get more in depth about possible ways to use a tool like ChatGPT in our instruction and maybe even instructional planning. But here's some good resources in the meantime. The prompt examples and prompt engineering guide, you've already seen, there's those links again. Connor Grennan, who's like head of AI in education or something, I forget which university, at one of the universities, has a Gen AI quick start guide. There are a lot of guides like this, but this one in particular I thought was, number one, like grounded in research, which a lot of them are not, and number two, really easy to understand. So that's a good one. Of course, we also have MSU guidance on Gen AI and instructional settings. That's important to take a look at. And there's some people who have kind of defined what AI literacy might look like. And so here's a resource if you're interested in digging into more of that. And if you're looking for more practical resources, like what are some examples of higher education assignments or projects that can integrate Gen AI tools, there is a publication through the Writing Across the Curriculum Clearinghouse, the WAC Clearinghouse, called a Text Gen Ed repository. There are, I think, like 47 or something peer-reviewed undergraduate level assignments that support students' AI literacy, rhetorical and ethical engagements, creative exploration, professional writing. One of my own assignments is in there related to ethical AI literacy. And that's pretty much all we have for today. So let's maybe share out, just to kind of conclude, what are some things that you learned today, and what are some things that you're still wondering about?
Framing is really important.
Yeah?
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want to say more about that?
Well, it can simplify or make the debugging very complicated if you're not careful on the front end. But if you're not careful, you're going to get all sorts of stuff. And I did. Got a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah. So sometimes it can be smart, sometimes it can be a little
Well, and sometimes it's smart in a whole different direction, and I didn't plan on going.
Right. Yeah. And then, Right?
I didn't know how to do it, I never done it before, this is pretty fun. I said, how do you lose 5 pounds in the next 3 weeks? But no, I can see this has a lot of more serious possibilities too, but it is kind of fun. I'm just absolutely amazed that, you know, in a nanosecond, all that information can come out. It's just incredible.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
But I also can see, I put in a question about what are the top 5 issues in the study of higher education, and, you know, it generated what I would consider those issues. But, so, you know, I can easily see how, in terms of education, a student could easily, you know, just generate something and write it right up. So we would clearly want to talk with students about how to use this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in writing, in using ChatGPT for academic writing tasks myself, I am in close contact with whatever professors have me as a student, and like, as a ChatGPT user, it's much easier for me to just sit down and show and talk about what I did, and talk through my thinking process, rather than just like, write a paragraph about how you use ChatGPT, because I'm probably going to use ChatGPT to write that paragraph too.
So like we have a doctoral student who actually did that this week, decided, I'm gonna try using ChatGPT to write an abstract for a conference proposal, and just to see what it came up with. It wasn't too bad.
Yep. Yeah, if you give it that real data, like your paper, it's going to be able to synthesize that pretty well.
Yeah.
So how would you think about that? I mean, that's a very realistic thing. Now, it wouldn't seem very academically honest to just send that in, but at what level, that's pretty good, at what level might somebody use that, I wonder?
Well, it
How
got
do
her,
you think about that?
got her started, and,
Yeah.
and like, Mike, like you said, I mean, as long as you have, the more specifics you can provide, the better.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you all for attending. I want to be mindful of our time. I can stick around for a few minutes if you still have other questions, but thank you so much for coming. And we're doing this basically same session after spring break, but we'll have a more advanced one a couple of weeks after that, like the 22nd or something. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to give credit where credit's due, Mike put this together, structured it, led it, so he's really rocking it.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
way better because of your critical input.
And ChatGPT.
You know, let me think about
workshop on
I
was
generative
gonna
AI.
You know,
That would be
this is the
amazing.
first presentation I've had about ChatGPT where I did not use ChatGPT for anything.
Is that right?
With the exception of, I think, like
The
showing that
list of
example.
pictures.
Yeah.
It was
Thank you.